Hello everyone, welcome to this Blender course where I will teach you how to create a game-ready asset. An Elven throwing dagger is the subject of today's lesson. We're going to go through modeling it in Blender and then texturing it in Substance Painter. I created this model for a Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord mod I'm working on with a team of people. And I actually created two different variants of this throwing knife. One that's completely bone, which we'll be creating together in this tutorial, and then one that has a bone handle and then a metal blade. Once you complete this tutorial, you'll be able to create both variants or even more, using the ideas and methodology you're about to see. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I've already thrown in my reference image and created a cube that basically circumferences the entire reference image. In this, I'm using an add-on called Box Cutter, which is a paid add-on to use Boolean operations to block out my mesh, but there's a number of ways you can do this, all in the free version of Blender. If you want to get an add-on that can do this, FastCarve, link down in the description, is a great method to use. Otherwise, you can use the knife tool. But the add-on isn't the important part, it's about what I'm actually doing here. So I'm creating a block out of my mesh, and I'm not getting too detailed, but I'm also not too undetailed. I'm creating the low poly mesh first, and then we're going to use subdivision surface to create a high poly so we can bake a bunch of detail into a texture map. So this will be the final form of the actual low poly mesh. We can add in some vertices and pull stuff around later, but I'm actually going to ignore this little cutout here. I tried doing this earlier before I started recording, and it wasn't having it. I was planning on returning to it, but I ended up not. There are plenty of ways you can do that though, and if you want to, go ahead and try to do that. But this reference image can also be found in the description below. So again, just following the form of this reference image. Not too crazy. You know, there are some spots I'm missing. Not going too in depth, but I am trying to keep the form. Okay, so now I have my cutout here, and again, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Just 3D modeling is a puzzle, and every 3D model is different, so you have to figure out how to put those pieces together. And right now I'm having an issue with the origin. The add-on didn't work correctly in this case, or most likely user error. Something went wrong. So here I'm going to basically reset it so the middle of the mesh is at the 0, 0, 0 coordinates. There we go. And for some reason I have a duplicate here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that in a second. And then, using the mirror modifier, of course, we are going to save ourselves a lot of time and just create an edge loop right there, and then go ahead and scale it down. Hop over into orthographic view, delete those vertices, and just like that we can apply our mirror modifier and scale it, or mirror it on the z-axis. Turn on clipping, make sure to do that. Alright, so we have our basic block out. Now it's time to start working on some of these more defining features that make this blade look elvish, or give it its curvature. So again, using the knife tool here, this is the free tool. You just press K to use it in Blender. I'm trying my best to match up my cuts with these vertices that already exist, because I'm going to have to create a topology that utilizes quads if we're going to put this in a game. So you have to be very mindful of where you're putting these vertices when you do this. There is room for improvement in editing later, but if you can save yourself the trouble up front, that'll save you some time and headache. I'm just going ahead, and I saw that my reference image kind of got off kilter there, so I'm trying to fix that. And I'm actually going to go in and fix it a little bit more and just make my life a little easier. I already notice I have a problem here. With the amount of vertices I have and not being able to maintain this curvature, so I am going to fix that though. I added in a vertice there. And actually added another one to match, and just continue matching this curvature here the best I can without going too crazy. This entire tutorial is real time, how long it took me to model this. I have done some sped up stuff in the past, and there's some people that prefer real time, so that's what we're doing today. I'm going to go ahead and delete this first end so I can start adding in my quads. So we're just going to use the F2 add-on, which is built into Blender, just to press F and fill in all those faces at once. And when that happens and there's no mess ups or insane stretching, you know you did your job right. So I'm quite happy about that. Now, time for this other part. And here I'm thinking about how am I going to, because that would be a triangle. So I'm going to add another vertex and pull these out and bring out that knife tool again. Try to match it up the best I can. Something that I've only recently gotten a grasp on after 4 years of using Blender on and off again is edge flow and managing your edge flow so you don't have weird sharp edges pinching where you're not supposed to. And this is something that will take you some time if you're new to Blender. Now, this tutorial isn't aimed at beginners. I mean, I'm not showing my hotkeys, mainly due to oversight, but if you have a good foundation of the hotkeys in Blender, this tutorial is for you, and I'll explain how I manage my edge flow. So there, I'm bringing the knife tool into the middle of those two vertices, and that's actually important. You wouldn't want to go to the end. It would create a triangle, and you'd have to do some stuff to fix that. So here I'm noticing some stretching, so I need to add in some more vertices to be sort of a halfway point. I don't want, a little bit of stretching is alright, but you don't want to make that a habit. And there we go. That is how it is supposed to be. And right now I'm thinking about how I want to manage this, because I know I need to have an edge flow that comes down for that blade and doesn't do anything funky. So I'm really just sitting here thinking about how I'm going to achieve this. And it's important to sometimes sit back and think about your next step. And if you get stuck, you just move on to another part of the model and come back later. I'm going to go ahead and delete that end and then start filling out some quads for the rest of the mesh. Now that I'm getting to the end here, I'm a bit perplexed about how to handle this, because I'm not quite sure how I want this edge flow to work out yet, because there's sort of a taper at the end of the pommel, I guess you will, if pommels are a thing for throwing daggers. Pull that out and then finish it off, and I'll show you the edge flow later about how that worked out. So here we can see we're left with a triangle after filling in these faces. And I'll show you how I fix that in just a second. I'm actually just going to dissolve that edge completely and just remove it. I don't think it's necessary for the topology. Just like that, now we're filled in. Now, there's the edge flow. The end has an edge, the middle does, which I wasn't so happy that the middle had it. I just don't know how to terminate that cleanly with quads. So, ultimately though, it ended up not being a big deal. I went ahead and pressed Ctrl 2 to apply a subdivision surface modifier on the second level just to see how it was coming out, and then I turned it off to continue working with the low poly mesh. So I'm still really perplexed about how I'm going to handle this, because most of my blades I've done in the past don't have that bottom right segment that curves back, which adds in a lot of topology that you have to deal with. So right now I'm just kind of pulling those down, and let me say something, the blade is very thick right now. Actually, once I'm done with this entire texturing process, I scale it in on the Z-axis to make it way more thin. I'm doing a little bit now, but I do it even more later. So if you want to go ahead and do that, if you're following along, feel free. Otherwise, we could do it at the end once we've created the textures. Since we're not actually changing the mesh, the UVs are still the same. The scale is just a little different. I'm doing the same on the top here just to visualize, just to see what the shape I'm going to end up with may look like. And at this point, I undo everything I just did so I can create a backup, because I have been bit by that so many times. So I name that one backup, and then I name the other one knife. I just hide it, so if I screw this up, because I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next here, but if I screw that up, I'll have a point. I won't have to restart. I'll have a point of safe return. So here I just turn on subdivision surface again to sort of visualize what the final result might look like. And I'm starting to bring these in. That was actually a mistake though, so if you're following along, don't do that. Don't do that yet, because, or if you do, you're about to see how I messed up. Because then I tried scaling or double tapping G and moving this down, but what I didn't notice is one of those vertices actually got merged with another since I have clipping enabled. And I will figure that out in a second when I notice there's pinching right there. So then I just Control Z back out and move this one back up to play nice. And that one as well, I sort of try to match them to play nice with the others. And that's more the shape that I'm looking for. It's starting to come together. We can sharpen this all up later. It's looking a little curved right now, but that's fine. Right now I'm just admiring the work, seeing if there's any potential shading issues, and then hopping back in, or turning off the subdivision surface and hopping back into edit mode to do some more work. So here I go, starting to fill in some quads, fill in some faces, and it's starting to go a direction that I'm not satisfied with. So simply with the edge slide tool, I'm just going to start creating some more vertices here and trying to make it not so stretched out. So I see I'm going to have another one here, so again, just sort of push and pull where I want it. Just trying to solve the puzzle of the edge flow. You really have to think a couple steps ahead here about where you want to be at the end of this. You can't just start willy-nilly filling in filling in faces because it may not result in how you want. And that's how I genuinely have worked in the past, just willy-nilly filling it in, working with end guns. But when you're creating a game-ready asset, you just can't do that. It's not going to look good. It's not going to be up to the standard of the game industry. You just can't do it. So here, I counted how many edge loops I would need, and I would need 5, but for some reason I put in 4. So I'm about to realize my mistake though, and undo that. And I put in 5, and it filled like it was supposed to. And just like that, I have mostly an edge flow that I'm satisfied with. There is one more error that I haven't noticed yet. There's an end somewhere, but we will find that together. So then I turn on proportional editing to sort of scale all these down together. There's the end by the way, right on the tip. So bringing all these down to form a blade. And it created some pinching down here because it merged some vertices that were already pretty close, and the proportional editing just sort of got them. So I'm going to select that edge loop and press H to hide it so it's not affected by this proportional editing. And then a similar problem down here. So since I already had moved that edge loop down, it happened again. So I'm also going to hide that one and do this one more time. If I can remember to turn on proportional editing. Bringing them back in to give it a look, and it's looking more and more like how I want it. And there's that end gun staring at me right in the face, and I see the error, I just haven't fixed it yet. So now here I come to fix the end gun. I finally found it. I go ahead and delete it. The easiest way for me to fix this was to grab a vertice and then extrude it down along the z-axis there. And so I have clipping enabled, it'll just end on the other point. And then just bridge these. And face them all together. Merge them by distance, I often do that. I select the whole mesh and just merge by distance to make sure there's no duplicate vertices. And then I take these and I actually move them in to give it more of a point at the end. And now I'm going to start sharpening things up. So using edge loops, what we can do is just sort of reinforce those edges, and it'll give it more definition. And this is why you need to have a good edge flow, or else you're not going to get that definition. It'll just terminate in weird places. Just like that, it's starting to really shape up. And here I decide before I undo all of that work because I want to make another backup. It's important to have more backups. I want to create something that I can use for the low poly version now that the topology has actually changed. I've actually moved vertices that will change the shape, and I don't want that to affect any UVs. So I'm going to have to do all of that again. That's why you need to always have backups of what you're doing, whether that's a save file or a duplicate mesh. Just pull those back. Once I pull those back, I'll create the backup because that's actually where the change occurred at. I'm going to do one more thing here too, and actually pull in these vertices a little bit to make the edge actually end at a point. Now I'm going to go ahead and create the backup again since I'm satisfied with where that's at. And now I can turn back on the subdivision surface modifier and start reinforcing those edge loops again. And just be aware I am constantly saving this file. I really should be saving duplicates of this file, but I'm not. It's something I can improve on. And at this point, I'm about ready to begin the UV process, which is actually super simple with this mesh, which is nice. To do that, I go ahead and apply the mirror modifier, and then using that middle edge loop, I just alt right click on that, and there we go. Ensure that it goes all the way around the mesh, which it does. And that's going to be our seam. So we press Ctrl E and then go down to Mark Seam. Then we can go into UV editing mode, select everything, press U and unwrap, and there is our UV map. It's great. Really, there's no problem with how this default one came out, but I go ahead and just rotate it for whatever reason. I felt like I needed to do that. I was going to try to make them a little bigger and optimize the map a little more, but ultimately wasn't able to do that. Just sort of playing around with the shape. And there's no harm in doing this as long as they don't overlap or exit the UV map. In fact, it'll give you some experience messing around with UV maps, so give it a go. And just like that, we have it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new material and give it a checker texture. And make the vector UV. And then scale it up once we're in material preview mode. And we go ahead and look at our UVs and how they are going to be interpreted in another program or with whatever textures we choose to apply. You want to make sure the checkers are all square. If they're rectangular, you're going to have to scale some UVs around. But mine were all square, so I was good to go. Make sure you apply rotation and scale and all that if you're having some issues. See if that may be why. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Well, I'm actually deleting these old backups right now. And creating a different collection called high poly. And a different collection called low poly. I actually deleted everything since I haven't applied the subdivision surface modifier. I don't actually have to go ahead and go back to that low poly one and mark the seams again. I can just duplicate it and then turn off the sub surf modifier and just don't apply it later. It really doesn't matter as long as you don't apply the modifier and make it permanent. At this point, all you need to do is export as an FBX and make sure you check selected objects, and then under geometry, select apply modifiers and save the file. And now we're ready to go to Substance Painter. So I'll catch you in the next video where we walk through the texturing process.